Sometimes I feel like I was born at just the right time to get into video games. I grew up experiencing 8-bit NES games, then saw everything evolve with the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis. I got to experience the transition to 3D where characters were now made up of blocky polygons. And let me tell you, I never felt more hype and excitement for any era of gaming like I did with the 6th generation. I mean, my god, look at Bowser in Super Mario 64, then look how badass he was in Luigi's Mansion. I remember losing my mind at that part of the game. Mario was no longer blocky, and now he was wearing denim. Link and Ganondorf were stylish as hell when they fought each other. My cousin bought a PS2 and he got Tekken Tag Tournament, and I thought that opening cinematic was the coolest thing in the world. Thinking back on my childhood, I am so thankful that I got to experience all of that I got to follow along and see gaming evolve and improve so dramatically. And of course, seeing all these games just made me wonder, what is Final Fantasy gonna be like in this new generation? Then one day, I was watching TV and I got to see a commercial that showed me just that.
Final Fantasy X is gorgeous and grand. Absolutely mind-blowing. Enthralling gameplay. Simply incredible. This is what PlayStation 2 is all about. Don't believe a word till you play it.
I've done it.
Final Fantasy X, rated T for teen.
Do I even need to say it? I mean, the character models were so detailed! The camera angles were actually zooming in on their faces and stuff, not just showing everything on top of a pre-rendered background. And we weren't gonna just read what the character said in text boxes, the characters were now talking and saying things. There's actual voice acting! You may laugh now, but back then, that was a huge selling point for a big RPG like this. I kept thinking about that commercial for the longest time. Yuna's "I've done it" was burned into my brain. Of all the games revealed for the 6th generation, Final Fantasy X captured my attention unlike any other. What a leap from Final Fantasy IX. What a leap for gaming in general. Seeing the coverage for Final Fantasy X really opened my eyes to how cinematic things were becoming, and just how much the technology was improving. It looked more like a movie than it did a game, and how fitting because Square released a movie in the exact same year too. 2001. Just 1 year after number 9 came out. Squaresoft was on fire back then. I didn't get a PS2 right away, so it was excruciating waiting to play this thing. But I'd see the magazines, I'd see the trailers and reviews and accolades. The game showed up at my local video store and I would stare at the back cover thinking to myself, one day. And that day did eventually arrive. Finally, I got a PS2. And let me tell you, I was not prepared for what I was about to play. This game didn't just meet my expectations, it surpassed them. When the first few hours of the game got its hooks into me, I just didn't want to drop the controller. I was so taken in by the amazing music, the fantastic world that was Spira. The story was so emotional and somber and gripping, and the storytelling was so good that all I wanted was to see what happened next. And the gameplay? Oh my god! This was everything I wanted from a next-generation Final Fantasy game. I mean, for the most part. Out of all the games, Final Fantasy X is my second favorite game in the whole entire series. It was one of the first video games to ever transport me to another world where I could escape from the harsh realities of life. I was playing this game till like 3 or 4 in the morning on weekends off from school. I could not put it down. I just had to play more. So yeah, this game kinda meant a lot to me. And coming back to this game in 2018, I was worried that at 30 years old with my newfound maturity, that maybe this game would turn out to be way worse than I remembered. But nope, still holds up. Well, again, for the most part. I know I've been gushing, but I'm not here to tell you that this game is perfect. Oh, for sure, Final Fantasy X is dated, and certainly a product of its time. Not everyone likes the minigames, or the long cutscenes, or even the main character. And yeah, that's funny on its own, but man, this scene is taken out of context all the time. I feel like people are starting to forget what this game was actually like, how emotional the experience is, how fun it is to play, and what an advancement it was for the RPG genre in 2001. For me, the good parts far outweigh the bad, and this is a game that I think anyone wanting to get into Final Fantasy should not miss out on. I love Final Fantasy X, and now I'm gonna tell you why. Like always, there will be spoilers. If you don't want this immersive and beautiful story to be ruined for you, I might recommend stopping the video now. But if you have way too much time to kill, then by all means, listen to my story. Our story begins in the city of Zanarkand, where everyone in town is about to attend the local Blitzball game. What's Blitzball? Basically, it's rugby, only everyone is swimming around in a big sphere of water. The only rule is to get the ball into the other team's goal. And that's it. There doesn't seem to be any penalties against kicking someone in the face or grabbing them from behind and choking the life out of them. Seriously, there's a lot of violence involved in this sport. It's kind of intense. And no, I don't know how the players are holding their breath underwater for long periods of time, but this is a universe where people can shoot lightning out of their fingertips, so hey, I'm not going to question the fantastic ability that all these players seem to have. Anywho, it's here we meet the main character of the story and one of the main athletes competing in the game, a man named Titus.
Star player of the Zanarkand Abes?
And don't worry, I'll address his name later. But Titus is the most popular athlete in the city. Everyone wants his autograph, the ladies can't help but grab him as he rushes to the arena.
Hey, let go of me!
Titus is Zanarkand's biggest celebrity. Well, aside from his father, who went missing out at sea over 10 years ago. The best Blitzball player of all time, a man named Jecht. And just as Titus is doing another crazy trick shot in another action-packed game, something rises out of the water and proceeds to start attacking all of Zanarkand. This attack completely trashes the Blitz arena and everyone scatters. It's then that Titus notices an old friend.
Orin! What are you doing here?
I was waiting for you.
What are you talking about?
This Orin seems to be pretty chill about the attack, walking away casually to Titus like some kind of badass, as if there isn't any real threat going on, for he knows exactly what this threat is.
We called it sin.
Sin?
And then Orin gives Titus a sword in order to fight off all the various creatures that spawn from the monster. He even explains that it's a gift from his father, the late Jecht. As they fight their way through to the core, Sin proceeds to absorb the entire city.
You are sure? It all begins here.
And after that, Titus finds himself waking up in a cold, empty ruin, completely alone, unaware of where he is. Well, I say alone, except for all of the monsters who want to kill him! Sweet Jesus! Without food and warmth, Titus's fate seems sealed when another vicious creature shows up to eat him. But that's when a whole bunch of strangers blow through the door and manage to save the day. However, they're a little hard to understand.
Right, whatever.
It turns out Titus has been picked up by a whole bunch of scavengers who identify as the Al-Bhed, a group of people who speak an entirely different language except for the lone girl on the ship, a woman named Riku. Titus explains the entire situation, which only prompts Riku to believe that Titus is sick, poisoned by the toxins that belong to the fearsome creature known as Sin.
Did I say something funny?
Because of Sin's toxin, yeah. There is no Zanarkand anymore. Sin destroyed it 1,000 years ago.
What do you mean, 1,000 years ago?
Yep, it appears that Titus has traveled through time, to an era where the city of Zanarkand is nothing but an ancient relic of a long-forgotten period. And Riku even warns Titus, watch who you mention Xanarkand to. After all, the world considers it a holy place, and you may offend some of the followers of Yevon. And before we can get any more information on that, the boat finds itself under attack as Sin strikes again. The rocking of the waves actually manages to throw Titus overboard, who once again blacks out as soon as he enters the water. The next time he wakes, he finds himself on a sunny beach where a bunch of Blitzball players have just misplaced their ball by whacking Titus in the head. Time to show these guys how you really hit this thing.
You know, amateur. Who you play for?
The Xanarkand Abes.
Oh my Christ, you had one job, Titus! One job! Hilariously, he just immediately backpedals by saying, I got poisoned by Sin. Yeah, that's what happened. Forget that last part.
But you're still alive. Praise be to Yevon.
It's here we meet Waka, captain of the Besaid Aurochs, the Blitzball team native to Besaid Island, an island that long ago had a technological wonderland much like Xanarkand, but Waka explains that all changed when Sin came to the world they know as Spira over 1,000 years ago. Supposedly, Spira was complacent, too reliant on machines and technology, and Sin was the punishment for their sloth. Luckily for Titus, Waka's a good guy and promises to lead him to the village and make sure he recovers from Sin's toxin. But not before having a little fun. And then Titus died. But really, Waka decides to give our hero a proposition. The annual Crystal Cup tournament is coming up for all the Blitzers in Spira, and it turns out that the Besaid Aurochs are basically complete trash.
I joined the Aurochs at 13, 10 years ago. 10 years. And we never won a game.
Come again? How the fuck do you play a sport for 10 years and never gain enough skill to win a single game? They fit the definition of amateur, but somehow I don't think they should be called even that.
You want me on your team, right?
So the plan is for Waka to bring Titus to the city of Luca, where hopefully he can help them win his last tournament. Because this year, Waka's leaving the team, so that he can become a full-time guardian to Besaid Island Summoner. And in the world of Final Fantasy X, a summoner is a disciple of Yevon who undertakes demanding rituals in all of the temples of Yevon. And anyone who can withstand the ordeal will gain access to the power of the Aeons, mythological beasts that will aid them in their pilgrimage to battle and defeat the monstrous force that they know as Sin. And as Titus arrives in Besaid's village, it seems that the island summoner has been doing the trial for over a day now. A lot longer than expected. And no one's going in to check on them, despite the possibility of traps and dangers. Because it's forbidden to enter the Cloister of Trials for anyone but the summoner and their guardians.
Hey, but what if something happens? What if the summoner dies?
The precepts must be obeyed.
Like I care.
Well, Titus is going to hell. But it's all good. Just as Titus and Waka arrive at the chamber with the other guardians, the door opens up to show the summoner. Our second main character, a woman named Yuna.
I've done it. I have become a summoner.
And at the center of Besaid Village, Yuna demonstrates her newfound ability by calling down the gentle Aeon known as Valifor, a winged beast that will answer her every call should she be confronted with danger. The training was over. Yuna was now ready to go on her pilgrimage. And that night, as everyone celebrates the occasion, Titus and Yuna certainly catch each other's attention.
I'm Yuna. Thank you so much for your help earlier.
Huh? I'm sorry about that. Wasn't I not supposed to?
Oh no, I was overconfident. So, tomorrow then.
Tomorrow?
You can tell me all about Xanarkand.
She's cute, yeah? Don't get no ideas.
No promises there, big guy. Hey, but what if she, comes on to me?
That's not going to happen.
Oh, Waka, how you forget. I'm the main protagonist. And the next day, the journey begins. Yuna departs from her hometown of Besaid Island to visit all of the other temples, to gain the Aeons that will help her stop Spira's greatest threat.
I will defeat Sin. I must defeat Sin.
And since the journey will be dangerous, sure to put them in the path of all kinds of dangerous monsters, Wakka gives Titus a new sword, one that belonged to his late brother, Chapu. And with that, the adventure begins. Now paired with the Black Mage Lulu and a ferocious dragoon beast named Kimahri, Titus hitches a ride with Yuna and her guardians as part of the Besaid Aurochs. But little do they know, this is only the start of their long adventure together. And that's the setup for Final Fantasy X. So before I talk about anything else, I gotta address the name Titus. Okay, so when the character's name is mentioned in any other Final Fantasy game, it's pronounced Tidus.
Me and Titus? But Titus.
Titus?
Titus. That's my name. Or at least I think it is.
In Japan, the names of Titus and Yuna actually have a wordplay going on. Titus's name is similar to their word for sun, and Yuna's name equates to moon. Sun and moon. So you get why the names are like that for that version. However, the main character's name is never said in the original game. You can actually name him whatever you want, and so I just did my usual placement of Clement, and in my head I connected how the word was spelt in relation to his theme and went with that. I mean, think about it. It's spelled Tidus. When I see TID, I think of tides, like a tidal wave. I think of water. The sport of Blitzball is played underwater. The sword he gets from Wakka and the thing he's shown to be wielding on the front cover of the game is a water sword. It's a water theme. He has a water sword, he plays a water sport, his name sounds like water, his name should be Titus. If they wanted to call him Titus, they should have spelt it Teedus. But they didn't. And if you think, well, that wouldn't be faithful to the Japanese original, then I got two words for you. Butts and Tina. But that's not what they called them now, did they? No. In North America, it's Bartz and Terra. On this issue, I think Square fucked up. This is a hill I'm willing to die on. His name should be pronounced as Titus, and that's what I'm going to be calling him throughout the entire retrospective. Hui. But I digress. So I think now's the perfect time to start talking about the gameplay. After all, at this point in the story, you've actually met every single party member. From Besaid Island onwards, you're only missing two characters, and the player actually gets to use them in the first hour of the game. Those two members being Auron and Riku. Now, being a next-gen PS2 Final Fantasy title, I had no idea how the gameplay was going to change. And where it counts, the game hasn't changed its design philosophy. It's still a turn-based RPG where you visit towns, buy items, find treasure chests, get into random battles, and take on a variety of bosses and super bosses that you'll need to defeat with very specific strategies. Titus is like a warrior class. Yuna's the white mage slash summoner, Lulu's the black mage, Kimahri's the dragoon slash blue mage. You got your haste spells, your poison, your shell, and Asuna, and yada yada yada. But as soon as you get into your first battle, you notice one major difference right off the bat. This is the first game since Final Fantasy III to not use the active time battle system. That's right! In Final Fantasy X, you do not wait for a gauge to fill up before it becomes your turn. You take a turn, the enemy takes a turn, and this repeats until you win. Well, I mean sorta. It's actually a little more involved than that. Actions happen immediately this time around. You don't pick what all three characters will do and then watch them all do it. You tell Titus to attack, he immediately attacks. Then it might switch to Wakka, or it might switch to one of your enemies, but the most useful thing they added to help you predict the flow of battles was a turn chart on the right side of the screen. At any point during a battle, you can see exactly who's up next to attack and who's going to follow them. So sometimes it might be a viable strategy, if you can kill enemies in one hit, to attack the target who's about to fight next. But this game still utilizes your agility stats, and the game still has haste and slow spells to help change it up too. The higher the agility, the more likely you'll have multiple turns. Even just using items in battles is considered a quicker action than simply attacking, so you might get an extra turn before the enemy does. And certain characters actually get delay attacks, where they can perform a move that will make their enemy stumble a bit, reducing the frequency with which they engage the player. And let me tell ya, Delay attacks are so freaking useful in this game, and I can't recommend it enough. The turn chart is so helpful, constantly shifting the portraits around when you highlight an ability to let you know how things are going to play out if you commit to that action. Not only does ditching the ATB system and using this turn chart make things a little more strategic, it drastically improves the flow of battles. Not waiting for gauges to fill and getting immediate results from performing actions makes grinding random battles feel like a constant thrill and not like you're just holding the X button down, especially with all the different enemy types your group goes up against. Like I said before, party members are all acting as a very specific class when the game begins. Waka, I guess, is the long-range archer type character, since he has a better time taking out flying creatures as well as enemies that are really far away from everybody else. But he doesn't use a bow and arrow, or a gun. No, Waka kills things by chucking his Blitzball at them. Imagine deciding to protect the world's only hope by defending them with a fucking soccer ball. Oh, Final Fantasy, never change. Riku has the Steal ability, which makes her the group's thief, and she's the only one who can dismantle robot enemies in one hit by doing so. Orin's Samurai Blade can pierce armored enemies. Waka can blind foes with his Dark attack. Every character is useful, and it makes you want to use all of them in battle. But oh no, you're thinking? The game only lets you pick 3 characters at a time. I can only have Titus and Yuna and Waka when I'm going through battles. Darn, it's gonna be hard choosing my party. But no, that's where you'd be wrong. Final Fantasy X introduces something that should have been in the series a long time ago. The ability to switch out any of the 3 party members with another off-screen character during a battle. That means at any point, you always have access to your black magic, your summons, whatever. And oh my god, that makes battles feel so much more fun and dynamic. If somebody gets hurt real bad, then whoever's turn is next can be immediately switched out with Yuna, who can immediately perform the cure spell. And this game doesn't operate the way Pokemon does, where if you switch out one Pokemon for another, it counts as a single turn and lets your opponent get a free hit. In FF10, when you switch out for another character, they immediately get to perform an action on that exact turn. So switching out to Titus and getting him to cast Hastega on the entire party is super helpful. And yeah, Titus is not mandatory to be in the party. Unlike Cloud, Squall, and Zidane from the PlayStation trilogy, you can put Titus on the sidelines and never use him. But really, you should be using everyone. Every character has something that makes them useful in combat. How 10 scatters all the abilities between every character is really well thought out. I don't have that problem that I did in 9, where I felt like so many of the party members had nothing special to offer, so I stuck with a very specific setup. I use everybody in this game, and that means they all get experience in battles, whereas the only game that let non-party members level up before this was 7. But Clement, I loved Kina's blue magic. Well, I didn't. But I absolutely love how Kimahri does it. You don't need to wait for a specific move to happen, you don't need to collect a rare material, you don't need to whittle their health down and almost accidentally kill them. All Kimahri has to do is perform Lancet. This allows him to absorb the essence of whatever enemy they're fighting, and more often than not, if the enemy has a skill, you immediately absorb and keep it forever. Collecting blue magic is so easy, and with the switching mechanic, so fun to do. Now Kimahri's blue magic is limited to his limit break feature, but that's absolutely fine too. Ever since Final Fantasy VII, we've been seeing some form of limit break show up in every game. But for my money, the best utilization of this feature was in Final Fantasy X. It's referred to as overdrives, and right off the bat, it works like you think. Get hurt a lot, the gauge fills up, and eventually you'll be able to perform some kind of super move that deals out a hard-hitting attack. But the thing you'll notice real quick is that using the overdrive is actually optional. Your attack icon doesn't get replaced, and the overdrive doesn't just automatically turn on. This means you can save it for whenever you want. Even finishing a battle and going into another one, you still get to keep the overdrive. This is what I was talking about in the Final Fantasy IX video, because maybe I don't want to waste it on random battles, maybe I'd rather save it for a special occasion. like a boss fight that springs up out of nowhere. That's all well and good, but it gets even better. Not only do you unlock multiple overdrive abilities per character, eventually as you level up and kill enemies, you'll be unlocking different overdrive methods, meaning you'll get other ways to fill up the gauge. Maybe I don't want to take unnecessary damage from enemies to get my overdrive. Maybe I should set it so that I get energy when I attack them. You can change it so you get energy when your friends get hurt, get energy when you kill enemies, get energy when you win battles. There are so many overdrive modes to unlock and choose from that the limit break feature can be tailor-made to fit your playstyle. And I love it! Not to mention that the attacks themselves are fantastic, with most of Titus's going back to the multiple hit animations that I loved in 7 and 8. Every character actually has a special little mini-game associated with their overdrive. Titus has a timing action, Waka has slot machines, Lulu has you rotating the analog stick a lot to see how many spells you can cast, and Auron has you put in a button combination much like Sabin before him. Riku's overdrive actually has you mixing 2 items together to create something new and awesome, and let me tell you, some of the supportive potions she can assemble will make so many of the super bosses a lot easier. Is there a random enemy with too much health that you don't want to fight? Then get Auron to launch that bastard!
That's how it's done.
I love the overdrive system in 10. Despite Titus's multi-hit attacks, I don't feel saving them all up for bosses makes the game too easy or broken. But I'll admit, coming back into this game, I did wonder whether the Aeon system would. Okay, so let's talk summons. As you go through the game, Yuna will be collecting more beasts to help her, which means she'll be recruiting the usuals. Bahamut, Ifrit, Shiva, Ramu, Ixion... Hey, where's Ramu? This is the second time since 8 they've dropped the lightning wizard for something else. What's your problem with Ramu, Squaresoft? I have always appreciated that ever since Final Fantasy VII, these mythological figures have gotten some super cool and fancy animations that made battles real exciting to watch. I've always loved seeing them as a kid, but now as an adult, I realize they're not usually my go-to when it comes to attacking. Sure, sometimes you get a summon like Carbuncle, which will cast Reflect on the entire party, or maybe Phoenix, which can revive every downed party member. But in Final Fantasy IX, all I thought was, why would I unleash Ifrit and watch this lawn animation when I could just have Vivi shoot Fire 3 on everybody and save me some time? At least in the classic games, they were quick and strong. Knights of the Round, though? That's a great summon. I just feel like summons could do more. More passive abilities, more than one attack. They should be a special event that makes them stand out from your regular ice spell. And then I played Final Fantasy X, and it absolutely delivered. In this game, when Yuna calls down Valifor or Ifrit or whatever, they become a temporary party member. And you play as them until it loses its HP. It replaces everyone in the party. Titus and crew run off, and the enemies will now only target your Aeon, who only has so much health. But boy does it hit like a truck. And depending on the Aeon, they could be capable of so much. Valifor has access to all kinds of black magic, and it even has a delay attack in the form of Sonic Wings, which I use to single-handedly slow down and beat a boss all by itself at the Kilika Temple. And that's not even mentioning the fact that later, you can use items to give the Aeons extra attacks and boost their stats, which already boost along with whatever Yuna's stats are. And all the Aeons have overdrives too. So their signature moves, Diamond Dust, Mega Flare, Hellfire, you build up their gauge, and they'll unleash something really crazy. Hell, sometimes I'd use the Aeons as a sort of meat shield. Sometimes you'd come up to a boss that has some crazy charge-up move or whatever, and rather than let them do it to my 3 party members, I'd call in Valifor and be like, sorry buddy, thanks for taking a bullet! It's so great! Also, in the options menu, you can make the Aeon animations really short, so you don't have to watch the same 30-second cutscene every time you call them. This is such a perfect summon system. They give beginners a nice safety net for the early portions of the game, but their low HP does become a bit of an issue by the time you start reaching the endgame battles. So I don't expect at the end for Ifrit to single-handedly take down Sin all by itself. I wish more RPGs handled summons like this game does. It's the most interesting thing Final Fantasy has ever done with the concept. And let's recap. Faster, more strategic battles, the ability to switch out characters on the fly, the best version of the limit break system, and a completely revolutionary take on summoning. Oh, and it should be mentioned, the fastest loading time since the Super Nintendo days. Look how quick you get into battles from the map! I freaking love everything that they added or improved, and Final Fantasy X truly felt like a next-generation title. Something that absolutely improved on the formula and put the franchise at the top of the mountain, as always. And I haven't even gotten into the boss fights or the sphere grid yet. I'll get back to this, but man, Final Fantasy X is a super fun game to play. So on the boat to Kilika Island, after Titus acts like a horse's ass and screws around with the crew, he starts to get to know our Lady Summoner. Yuna assures Titus that she actually believes him about Zanarkand. After all, she heard all about it from one of the guardians who protected her summoner father, a man named Jecht. Titus comments that it couldn't possibly be his father. After all, he disappeared at sea over 10 years ago. But for Yuna, 10 years ago is exactly when he showed up to Spira. This doesn't sit well with our hero. As the game goes on, we keep getting flashbacks to the time when Titus was a child in Zanarkand. And boy, does he hate his father. Jecht was the best Blitzball player of all time, and he wasn't afraid to constantly remind his son that he would never be as good as his old man. And adding on to that, Jecht was also a notorious alcoholic.
They say you're no good because you drink all the time.
I can quit drinking whenever I want.
Then do it now.
What did you say?
Even in his dreams, Titus is haunted by his dad.
You with a woman? You can't even catch a ball! Oh, what's the matter? Gonna cry again? Cry, cry. That's the only thing you're good for.
I hate you!
And when Jecht eventually disappeared, Titus was not afraid to be blunt with his mother.
Who cares whether he comes back or not? But he might die. Fine, let him.
The one thing that has motivated Titus to be as good as he is at Blitzball is proving his father wrong. So finding out that the guy might still be alive and kicking in Spira, well, that's not exactly something he wants to hear. But Titus has got bigger problems to worry about because he's still stranded in the future with the calamity known as Sin. And that calamity decides to show itself once again. Despite the crew's best efforts to fight it off, Sin is fucking huge and basically does whatever the hell it wants. And that includes visiting the nearby port town of Kilika Village. And they were not prepared for what today would bring. Yuna touches down onto Kilika Port to assess the damage, and this is when she begins one of the summoner's most important tasks, that of the sending. See, in Spira, death works a lot differently from how it would anywhere else. If people are killed out of nowhere and they didn't feel fulfilled with their life, their anger gets the best of them. Then their souls actually transform into the various monsters and fiends that you battle along your journey. But a summoner can perform a special dance to guide the lost souls to the far plane, which is where all the content spirits go in the afterlife. And this scene is one of the most memorable moments of the game. Not only is it hauntingly beautiful watching Yuna dance atop the body of water, but with the dead bodies and the grieving families, you totally understand just how hopeless the situation in Spira really is. Sin causing destruction is not a rare occurrence. In fact, there's an entire organization known as the Crusaders who have made it their life's work to combating sin whenever they can. But they know they'll never kill it. Sin is huge! It's a giant armored whale that can fly in the sky and suck up anyone around it. What chance does a warrior riding a chocobo have against that? Instead, the Crusaders' only purpose is to distract Sin, to lead it away from civilization and save all the people. So choosing to become a Crusader is basically a death wish, as Wakka's late brother Chapu soon discovered.
He was with the Crusaders when they fought Sin last year. He didn't make it.
The only hope for Spira is with the Summoners, and as it turns out, many Summoners have actually defeated Sin before, including Yuna's late father Braska, who helped bring peace to Spira over 10 years ago with the help of his guardians, Auron and Jecht. But wait, defeated Sin? Then why is he back?
Sin dies and is reborn.
Wait, if it just comes back...
Don't say it isn't worth it. Because it is.
For Spira, Sin never goes away. They continue to use summoners to defeat it for temporary peace, but it just keeps coming back. They have no alternative. The only thing they can hope for is that eventually it'll go away for good.
Sin is our punishment for our vanity. And it will not go away until we've atoned.
Anywho, this brings us to Luca, and after Titus participates in the Blitzball game, oh don't worry, I'll talk about Blitzball. Fiends attack the stadium, and that's when Auron shows up to help save the day. And after the attack, you can bet that Titus certainly has questions about what the hell's going on.
Hey you! Don't just stand there! All of this is your fault! Getting swallowed by Sin, ending up here in Spira, not being able to go back to Xanarkand, everything!
Auron explains that he originally came from Spira, and 10 years ago he helped defeat Sin with Yuna's father Braska and Titus's father Jecht. Afterwards, he went to Xanarkand to watch over the boy until he was old enough to come to Spira too. Again, as a favor for Jecht. Titus asks if he's alive.
It depends on what you mean by alive. I felt something of Jecht there in that shell, couldn't you?
It can't be.
It is. Sin is Jecht.
And that's one hell of a surprise. The monster whale that's killing everyone and terrorizing the world is actually Titus's father. And with that, Auron asks Yuna permission to accompany them as a guardian, with one caveat.
He comes too.
Hi, guys. Howdy.
And since Yuna was really hoping Titus would join along and become a guardian anyway, this all works out for the best. And this is the setup for one of the more infamous scenes in the game. But before I get into all of that, I just want to talk about how immersive Final Fantasy X's story is. Visually, this game is still one of the most impressive technical achievements on the PlayStation 2. This was a huge departure from the PS1 visuals. They had to design entire 3D locations because they couldn't rely on pre-rendered backgrounds anymore. This allows for dynamic camera angles that move around when you're running through the world, that zoom in on a character's face for storytelling purposes. And boy, these character models. Not only did certain scenes have tons of motion capture to help sell what they were trying to say, but the game even had really detailed facial animations, so you could see when a character was happy, or when they were sad, or even just to show a subtle little detail. To be fair, it's not always like this. The game actually has low poly models for when there's a lot of activity on screen, but whenever something important is happening, they usually have the good faces going on, so whatever. Nowadays, you may take all of this for granted, but it's important to remember that this is still a game that was released in 2001. It's over 17 years old. Most RPGs before this were filled with text and faraway shots. They didn't go all the way in like this game did. It felt like watching a movie. I mean, they got some top voice actors for this thing too. John DiMaggio, who you may know as Bender, Jake the Dog, or Marcus Phoenix, was the voice of Wakka and Kimahri.
Boom! Like happy festival fireworks, yeah?
Tara Strong, aka Bubbles, Twilight Sparkle, or Harley Quinn, was the voice of Riku.
Leave the fiends to us professionals.
And then there's James Arnold Taylor, famous for playing Ratchet, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and of course, Johnny Test. He plays our main character Titus, and boy, talk about a polarizing reaction. There are lots of people who just hate Titus. Oh my god, people hate this character. I mean, look, he's a cocky, headstrong athlete who acts very impulsively and gets into fits of anger and frustration quite easily. The kind of character who just needs to scream whenever he's feeling bad.
Ah!
This is a guy who suffered emotional abuse as a kid, and whenever he hears about his father, he gets mad because the guy was a piece of shit. Jekt is a trigger for Titus. And when you're stranded 1,000 years in the future, where your dad has become a giant killing machine that's terrorizing the world, well hey, I'm willing to accept that he might be a little emotional. Just take the scene where Auron says, "Hey fine, if you don't want to find out why your father's like this, you can just stay here then."
Ah! What am I supposed to say? You tell me it's my decision. But I don't have a choice, do I? You're the only one who can tell me what's going on anyways. I have to go with you, I have to!
And well, yeah, he's right. Auron isn't giving him a choice. What else is Titus supposed to do? I find his reactions to things kind of acceptable, honestly. And yeah, James Arnold Taylor's performance certainly has this effect where for some, it's nails on a chalkboard. I think it suits him perfectly. Titus is a character whose reputation is always about being whiny, but I think that's a big exaggeration. Most of the time he's a very calm character. A curious guy wondering how Spira works the way it does. A guy who always extends a helping hand to anyone who needs it. He has a lot of energy and he says some dumb stuff here and there, but for me, I still like him as a protagonist. As for the other voice acting, Matt McKenzie is fantastic as Auron. All of the NPCs you meet along the way have tons of recognizable talent from cartoons and games, which makes them all stand out. And of course there's Hetty Burris as Yuna, who I couldn't imagine being voiced by anyone else. She absolutely sells the kind and demure personality that Yuna has.
Then, you appeared, Kamari. You said you were looking for the daughter of Braska, remember? At first, I was so scared. Until I realized what a gentle person you are.
Watching this clip just reminds me of how much of an escape Final Fantasy X is. When the characters and writing are so endearing, it's hard not to just fall in love with it.
A summoner with bad hair. What's the world coming to?
You could have woken me up.
We called to you, but with all that snoring.
Oh, you too, Sir Auron?
Once Lady Yuna fixes her hair, we leave.
I really love these cutscenes because there's a sincerity here, a love for the characters in the writing. It's why the tragic moments matter more when they happen. It's why I have so many fond memories of the adventure. And the music, as always, does such a fantastic job selling all of this. Final Fantasy X had 3 composers. This time we got Masashi Hamauzu and Junya Nakano, who got to join Nobuo Uematsu to help him out since, you know, the guy's basically composed thousands of songs for the last 9 games, so yeah, I don't blame him for getting some extra help on this one. Nobuo would go on to make music for 11 and 14, but for this retrospective, with games like 10-2, 12, and 13, he will be disappearing from the franchise as we go on, and his music will definitely be missed. 10 still delivers on some of the most memorable music I've ever heard in an RPG. Now, when Final Fantasy X decided to be a little more cinematic, this kind of bled into the gameplay as well. Would you believe this game has no world map? Something that has been a standard of the series and featured in each of the 9 games is not here. Instead, you the player are meant to go through every single area in a linear fashion. So when you leave the city of Luca, you find yourself in the Mi'ihen High Road. As you're leaving the Thunder Plains, you can see and then enter the Macalania Forest. When you start approaching the mountains of the Comlands, you'll eventually climb Mount Gagazet. It's a feeling meant to enhance the experience of being on a journey, of actually traveling the world of Spira. As the characters go farther and farther, they continue to take breaks and talk about the situation, stumble upon magical new sights, and experience the harsh conditions most people would avoid. It's about selling the adventure. And you don't get an airship to return to previous places until you're at the final dungeon of the game. So when you've gone a certain distance, it'll take just as long to go back. And I actually really like this experience. It really adds a lot to the escapism of the game. But I can't deny that it's come under a lot of criticism. Most of the time you're walking down a single pathway. The Mi'ihen High Road is a lawn pathway. The Moonflow is a lawn pathway. The Macalania Forest is really just a pathway. Sometimes you'll get an area like the Kilika Forest, which has tons of spaces to go through, or a big open field like the Beaconell Desert, but it doesn't hide the fact that you don't have a lot of options. This is very much a linear adventure, which doesn't really open up until you get to the very end. Now, I've always been of the opinion that Final Fantasy has always been a linear franchise. You can gush all you want about Final Fantasy IX, but that doesn't change the fact that you start in the Evil Forest, then go to an ice cave, then Dolly, then Lindblum, and yada yada yada. Some games feel more constrictive than others, I suppose. When the battles are so fun, I don't care. When I'm so engaged in the story, I don't care. And besides, Spira is still filled with lots of variety in the different races, towns, and scenery that it never truly feels repetitive. Heck, at the very least, the game does a good job of trying to hide treasure chests from you. And that's not even counting all the various Albed primers, which will help translate their language so you can understand what they're saying during cutscenes. These primers can even be carried over into New Game Plus to make replaying certain scenes feel a little more fresh. Uin Sudran Pufuk Kujuk, Binba Sugao Tekrafikran. And like I said, the game opens up at the end. You don't have to get the Aeon Yojimbo. You don't have to explore the Omega Ruins. You don't have to take on the ultimate super boss Nemesis. And you certainly don't need to play the game of Blitzball. Oh, Blitzball. So instead of having a special card game like 8 and 9 did, 10 decided to go all in on the fictional sport of Blitzball. It's not just Titus's occupation, you can actually compete in a gigantic Blitzball league and try to dominate the sport. And what do I think of it? It's a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, look, this is not going to play like something EA Sports would have designed. It's not multiplayer, you don't just push a button to check guys or kick the ball or anything like that. Being Final Fantasy, it is a stat-based battle system of sorts. Characters' defense, pass strength, and goal strength must all have good stats in order to stand a chance in the game. When you first get introduced, you get subjected to this giant tutorial that just covers way too much information to the point of being intimidating. And let me warn you right now, that first mandatory game they make you play is really unfair for beginners. So the Besaid Aurochs finally win their first game in 10 years, but Wakka ends up getting injured, so Titus is the only player on the team with a special shot worth a damn. And now they have to go up against the Luca Goers, a bunch of assholes who are known as the best team in the league. And the Aurochs, well...
they're a living, breathing, statistical impossibility. I've never seen a team this bad.
And yeah, get a load of these Blitzball teams. The Kilika Beasts, the Albed Sykes, the Guado Glories, the Ronso Fangs, and of course...
the Xanarkanabes.
It's quite the sport. But man, they weren't kidding when they said the Besaid Aurochs fucking suck. Their stats are so much lower than the Luca Goers, and the game starts in auto mode, meaning the computer decides where the hell they move until you, the player, decide when they're going to pass the ball or shoot on the goal. And when the AI is so freaking dumb, it's like, why would you do that? When the game begins, push triangle, set it to manual. Believe me, it helps so much. But the other thing that's confusing is that the camera angles are always changing, and how you're trying to move the player is not accurate to what's on screen. You try moving left and maybe he goes up, or down, or back to their own goalkeeper where you don't want them to go. And then I realized that the input of my control stick was only being reflected in the tiny little map on the bottom right side of the screen. So whenever I played Blitzball, I was always just looking at this space to know where I was in relation to all the players and when I should pass or take the shot. And God, with that first game, you need Titus. You absolutely need him to get to the goalpost and take his eject shot, but make sure he doesn't get 2 or 3 guys in his circle because they will beat the shit out of him and take that ball back. This is the worst first impression for Blitzball. It's way too hard and intimidating for newbies to ever want to give this a shot. You can't even raise the Aurochs stats before this game happens. I mean, hell, I guess it fits thematically with the story. It's the worst team in the league going against the best, Titus is their only hope, but goddamn, man. The only thing you get for winning this game is the Crystal Cup and 30 strength spheres which any random enemy can drop. So nothing exclusive or cool. If you lose, well gosh darn, at least you gave it your all and everyone respects the Aurochs now for losing a game 7-0. But golly, what heart they have! It's the only mandatory game you need to play, but this is when the league opens up. You'd think they'd have to wait half a year, but nah, here's the new season already. Anytime you reach a save point, no matter where you are in Spira, you can participate in a Blitzball game to pass the time. And just like with the card system in 8 or 9, you can approach random strangers, push the square button, and maybe they might be a talented Blitzball player who you can recruit to join the Aurochs. And with new players who don't suck ass, you can actually start assembling a dream team of people who might be super fast, filled with stamina, or use some interesting status effects that can really turn the tide in battle. And personally from this playthrough, my MVP was kinda shocking. At the Luca entrance, you can recruit 2 of the stadium's security guards, and their names are Biggs and Wedge. Biggs I could take or leave, but Wedge? Holy shit, Wedge! This guy would take a beating like a champ and he would score on that goal like it was nobody's business. He made Titus look like a chump and he was incredible. Can't recommend Wedge enough. Blitzball takes a lot of getting used to. The reason you want to play in the league is to get exclusive prizes that you wouldn't anywhere else. This includes Wakka's ultimate weapon, by the way, and that pissed a lot of people off. They hate the fact that you gotta play this janky sport minigame for hours just to be able to get it. I mean, you could customize Wakka a really great weapon instead of playing Blitzball, but I still get it. I didn't like this minigame when I first played it. It was too hard and I was having so much trouble wrapping my head around what to do. But once I understood the mechanics of the game, it did get oddly addicting. I also discovered how to drastically manipulate the enemy AI because boy are the other teams stupid. I could score a goal on them and just run out the clock where my goalpost was and they would just sit there doing nothing because I haven't approached them yet. Titus throws the ball to Jasu, Jasu back to Titus. Titus holds it. Holds it. Holds it. A character like Brother is so fast that you could literally lead your opponents in circles and they'd never catch you. You could hang out behind your own goalpost and they'd do nothing. Like Sonic Riders, this game is so confusing to figure out. But once you do, it actually gets kind of fun, I'm not gonna lie. But it is still very hard to recommend. I don't expect all of you to like it. But hell, it is a giant, substantial minigame, and there are lots of people who love playing it. Just another one of the tiny aspects that make Final Fantasy X such a fulfilling experience. But enough about Blitzball, let's move on to a much easier topic. Religion. How sin came to be is the big mystery of Final Fantasy X. Where did it come from? Why does it keep coming back? And no doubt these are questions the people of Spira ask every single day. But the religion of Yevon, which is made up of tons of priests and summoners and maesters, seems to have it all figured out. They know for sure that sin exists because of our vanity. They know for sure that advanced technology that they refer to as machina is what angered the gods and brought destruction upon them. And the ancient cities that lie in ruins are an example of this truth. Being from 1,000 years in the past, Titus has never heard of Yevon. They didn't exist in Zanarkand, and something just feels weird about them. When Wakka teaches him how to do Yevon's signature prayer, Titus recognizes it as a call sign for victory that Blitzball fans used to do before games. So when did that start happening? Without any major governments in place, Yevon basically runs the world. The Crusaders answer to them, it's worshipped by everyone, including the Guado and Ronso tribes, and with no other way to fight sin, following their beliefs just seems like the right thing to do. They don't seem oppressive, and I don't know what their stance is on LGBT people, but so far they seem alright. The Al Bhed, however, would disagree. They don't believe in Yevon's teachings, and they still regularly use Machina. It also doesn't help their case that they keep kidnapping summoners, as they try to do with Yuna on 2 separate occasions. Although Titus discovers an interesting tidbit about Yuna, her mother was an Al Bhed, which means that she shares heritage with them. In fact, Yuna's uncle is a man named Sid, and he's actually the leader of the group, as well as the father of Riku, which makes the 2 girls cousins. As you can imagine, tensions run high.
Wait, you're not an Al Bhed hater, are you?
When the entire disaster surrounding the world is built upon the concept of people using Machina and not following the teachings, Yevon considers them blasphemous. This has led to strong prejudice against the Al Bhed, and that couldn't be more clear than with Wakka. He's a huge devout Yevonite, and he has some strong feelings about these blasphemers.
Don't go near Al Bhed anymore, okay? They're trouble. It's because of people like the Al Bhed screwing everything up. Those sand-blasted grease monkeys.
Yevon did something really bad to us before.
Well, you Al Bhed must have deserved it.
It's easy to point at them and go, they're the reason sin is here. They're the reason sin keeps coming back. What can you expect but massive persecution? But Titus knows Riku. He was saved by the Al Bhed. They can't be all that bad. He questions why Machina is as bad as people say, and this in turn starts to make the others in the group question it as well. But things start to unravel with Yevon when the crew gets to know one of the 4 maesters that are in charge of everything. You got Maester Kelk, Maester Keenock, who is an old friend of Auron's, Maester Micah, who's in charge and basically the Pope of Spira, and then there's Maester Seymour. And one look at the guy and you immediately think, oh shit, it's the villain. I mean, come on! No one who's a good person would look like this. But he is one of the few Yevonites extending an olive branch to the Al Bhed. He and Keenock secretly back a joint venture between the Crusaders and the Al Bhed to launch a full-on Machina attack on Sin in the hopes of destroying it without summoners.
But using Machina, that's bad, isn't it?
Pretend you didn't see them.
Beg your pardon, but that's not something a maester should say.
Then pretend I didn't say it.
And how does the operation go? Well... it doesn't go well.
Satisfied?
What do you mean?
Those who turned from Yevon died, while the faithful live on.
Auron makes quite the suggestion. Had Yevon done this on purpose, knowing that the Al Bhed would fail and tons of people would die, well hell, that's a real cavalier way to prove a point. Eventually the group meet up with Seymour at his home in Guado Salam, where not only does he show them a super crazy holosphere of Zanarkand at its prime, but he also asks Yuna for something really unexpected.
He asked me to marry him.
A moment's diversion may amuse an audience, but it changes nothing.
Even so, the actors must play their parts.
Okay, come on, he's clearly evil. Guado Salam is also home to the Far Plane, the place that all souls go to when they pass on. And it's pretty interesting because if you go there and think really hard about a loved one that has passed, their ghostly image will show up to greet you. Titus tries this with Jecht, but no dice. He is most definitely still alive. And as the game goes on, Titus keeps getting mementos of his old man, as he left behind dozens of spheres documenting Lord Braska's pilgrimage. And it's kind of interesting seeing him grow as a person. He gives up drinking, Spira's plight becomes his problem, he even wants to leave a legacy to his son, who he clearly loves very much. It's interesting seeing a positive side to the guy who up till now was just Titus's abusive father. We even come to understand that Titus felt resentment for how much his mother preferred spending time with Jecht instead of her own son. But Jecht, in his own way, was always trying to look out for him. And yeah, this leaves Titus pretty conflicted. If there's any constant I always see with the fandom, it's that people really love Jecht's character. He certainly let his macho badass shtick get in the way of his parenting, but you never doubt that he's still a good person underneath those flaws. No one gets to choose who their parents are, and I think the conflict that Titus feels is super relatable. As the group leaves the farplane, though, a specter tries to follow them. That of Seymour's late father, Jiskel. After Yuna sends the spirit back, it drops a sphere on the ground, and hoo boy, the info inside. Turns out, and big time spoilers here, Seymour is evil! What? I can't believe it! Seymour mortally wounds his father, and in his dying breaths, Jiskel recorded a message speaking of the evil in his heart, and his regret that he let his son grow to be this way. Yuna decides to confront him personally.
I came to stop you.
So be it.
And after an intense fight, we actually kill Seymour. He's dead! A Maester of Yevon is dead! Oh boy. Basically, Yuna and friends become traitors, fugitives for attacking an esteemed holy figure. Then after a chase, and an ice collapse, and a visit from Sin, everybody gets transported to the Beaconel Desert where the Al Bhed live. Yuna gets separated and ends up inside the Al Bhed's main structure, but that's when the Guados show up to attack the place and kidnap her. It's here that the crew get acquainted with Sid, as well as many of the summoners that have gone missing. And it's then that the truth gets revealed to Titus. They were kidnapped because the Al Bhed don't want them to die. If Yuna wants to summon the final Aeon and defeat Sin, she'll have to sacrifice her life to gain that power. Since the beginning, Yuna was always planning to die at the end of the journey, something no one brought up even once during the pilgrimage.
Tell me why. Why were you hiding it?
We weren't hiding it.
It was just too hard to say.
To be honest, this wasn't actually much of a twist when this event happens. In fact, the game's foreshadowing is so blatant that it's kind of hard not to figure out certain developments. When Titus is gushing to Yuna about revisiting the Moonflow after they beat Sin, and everyone gets all silent and quiet for 10 seconds, yeah, I don't think she's gonna make it. When Titus is narrating that he was the only one really laughing in a scene filled with laughter, then I guess everyone's secretly sad. I wonder why that is. Final Fantasy X likes to sprinkle in clues of things to come, and it's good for replays of the game, but sometimes they just outright reveal things way sooner than they should.
Why are you still here, sir? I beg your pardon. We Guado are keen to the scent of the farplane.
Gee, I wonder what's up with Auron. It's gonna be hard to figure out. But all that being said, I think it does add a tragic layer to know that Yuna's been so selfless and kind and strong, knowing full well that she's going to die. And for a lot of players, it's going to change the feeling of scenes when you replay the game and now know what's going on. This is one of the sadder games in the series, a game about death and loss and sacrifice and hopelessness. The backdrop of Spira is really powerful. It has a lot of themes that resonate with so many players, and you gotta remember the time frame of when this game was released. I gotta imagine that Final Fantasy X was pretty relevant in 2001. Sid and the Al Bhed have to abandon their home since it's become compromised, and that's when we discovered that they've actually restored a really impressive piece of machina, an airship. And using that, our heroes head to the city of Bavel, where it turns out that Seymour is still alive, and he's trying to marry Yuna. Like I said, death is weird in Spira. Apparently, if you have a strong enough will, you can just not die. So that's interesting. I really love when the airship touches down and everyone grinds down to the ceremony like it's Sonic Adventure 2 or something. Oh, and hey, turns out it's a shotgun wedding.
Aren't those weapons forbidden by Yevon?
There are exceptions.
So our heroes manage to escape, stumbling upon even more machina in the Bavel Temple before collecting the Aeon Bahamut. But this only leaves them cornered and gets them captured.
The real traitor is Maester Seymour. He killed his father Jiskel with his own hands.
Hadn't you heard?
Seymour is so damn weird, man. There's just something about the way he talks that is so smug, it's incredible.
I knew you were bad news the first time we met.
Oh, my sincerest apologies.
Seymour!
The best exchange between a hero and villain ever. So yeah, Yuna tries to explain that Seymour is evil, and because he's dead, she needs to send him right now. This only encourages Maester Micah to reveal that he's actually dead too. Yevon's filled with all kinds of corrupt assholes, people who toy with others' lives, hypocrites who ignore their own rules to govern the world as they see fit. They declare Yuna and friends traitors for opposing them and sentence them to death. So yeah, Yevon's evil. Or at least the people in charge of it are. Certainly none of the priests involved have bad intentions, they're all being led astray by a few bad apples. I wouldn't think the game is trying to send a message that all religion is bad, merely that it can be corrupted just like everything else. Final Fantasy has always taken a pretty rebellious stance on issues like this. Screw the corporations, screw your world leaders, screw their dogma. Don't let anyone use you. Think for yourself, and don't be blind. Upon my revisit of the game, I found the idea of Yevon a lot more interesting than I did as a kid. Why would Yevon tell people not to use Machina? So they could have it all for themselves and always have power over the people. Jesus, that's sinister. And then you talk to the scholar Machen at Mount Gagazet, and he actually recounts about how the Hymn of the Faith, a song featured prominently in all of the temples, was originally a song made to protest Bavel and Yevon for their greed. But they changed the story. Yevon made it their song, said it was created to soothe the souls of the dead, rewriting history to suit their needs. Coming back to this game, I found all of this so fascinating. Of course, because the villains are so dumb, they place our heroes in an easily escapable dungeon, thinking that would kill them, so naturally, they escape. This pushes Seymour into full-on devil mode, as not only does he kill Maester Keenock, but he also kills Maester Kelk and most of the Ronso tribe to enhance his power. And he reveals his batshit plan.
If all life were to end in Spira, all suffering would end. I will take from you your strength, Yuna, your life, and become the next Sin. I will destroy Spira. I will save it.
You're totally nuts!
And that's how Seymour becomes a recurring boss fight throughout the game. Speaking of which, it's been a while since I talked about the gameplay, so let's get back to it, eh? Final Fantasy X does not feature a traditional level-up system. It's not like you get a certain amount of experience and then your stats raise. In this game, you have to collect spheres so that you can navigate the sphere grid. It's a giant series of pathways and circles that all contain various amounts of stat gains and abilities. If you come up to a node that says it will raise strength by 2 points, activating it will turn your 50 strength into 52, and it stays that way forever. When you need new abilities for your characters, you go along the pathways until you find Thundara, Blizzara, Cura, whatever. Activate those, you can perform those spells whenever you want. Every ability is in this sphere grid. Stealing, poison, armor break, you name it. And by defeating enemies in battles, you do accumulate experience that grants you sphere levels. A sphere level is just a fancy way of saying you can move one space on the grid. But in order to activate those nodes, you'll need to use one of 4 sphere types that enemies all over Spira drop. Power, mana, speed, and ability spheres. You get one of those, and you can activate any node that's associated with it. But if you don't have the sphere necessary, it might be wise to build up experience until you do, because if you go too far down the grid, you'll have to get more sphere levels just to go back the way you came from. And as you go along the game, you'll get some special unique spheres that allow you to teleport, let you create new nodes in blank spaces, and break locks that allow you to branch off into other pathways and get other abilities. It's a deep system, and for many, that's the problem. What used to be so simple and quick in the previous 9 games has now become a much more involved thing. You can't get abilities instantaneously because there is a level of customization and choice here that allows you to do something different with your characters. The entire sphere grid is interconnected. Everyone's pathway is close to everyone else's. So for example, I maxed out Kimahri's pathway right away. He ran out of places to go, so he had to break a lock and go into someone else's. He's right in the center, and I had to decide, do I want another black mage? Do I want another white mage? Do I want him to break armor and have lots of strength like Auron does? So the game starts out like a class-based Final Fantasy, but by the end it starts resembling games like 7 and 8 and allows for more customization. And I like that! If you dedicate like 100 hours to it, you get everyone every ability and maxed out with 255 stats in every single category. And then Lulu can murder the fuck out of people with her plush dolls. On a casual run, I don't find it time consuming. I'd build up like 3 or 4 sphere levels max per area, and then before I got to a boss or a new place, I'd fill them in, cycle the characters with L1, R1, and yeah, I wasn't constantly stopping to change my equipment or whatever. I know for some, it set a precedent. This opened up the floodgates for license boards and Crystariums, but hey, for my money, the sphere grid is no Crystarium. When it comes to equipment, you only have 2 things, 1 weapon and 1 armor. And unlike previous Final Fantasies, these weapons don't necessarily have stats tied to them, so you're not constantly finding weapons that increase in power more and more as the game goes on. What you do have though are ability slots. Sometimes you get a weapon with an ability that actually can raise your strength by 10% or something. Other times it can add elemental properties, turn things to stone, triples the ability points that you earn in battles. And that's just your weapons. With your armors, you can get abilities that eliminate random encounters, make you invulnerable to poison, lower the cost of magic, and yada yada yada. You still visit shops to buy these weapons, but more often than not, you're gonna fight tons of monsters who drop these things like candy. Seriously, at one point before Mount Gagazet, I got so over-encumbered with weapons that I literally sold like 50 of them right then and there. You find a lot of basics and duplicates, so it's not like I want to hold on to them anyway. But when Riku joins the party, that's when things get interesting, because she has the ability to customize the materials you collect from monsters into specific abilities for any of your blank weapons. You have a weapon with 4 blank slots? You can make that weapon have whatever abilities you want. And let me tell you, it is fantastic to customize a weapon that allows you to break the damage limit. For the first time ever, Final Fantasy lets your characters hit beyond 9,999 with a basic attack. If you're strong enough, you can raise that damage all the way to 99,999. And with that much power, you'll decimate any mandatory boss that dares challenge you. That's not to say that getting the materials for such an ability will be quick and easy. Oh no, you'll need to fight a lot of tough customers and get some rare materials just to be able to do that. But at least the option is there for players who really want to make their fighters as specific as possible, especially if they don't want to go for every character's ultimate weapon. When you're going for Auron's ultimate weapon, Riku's, Yuna's, it's a little time consuming, but nothing too crazy. The other 4 characters, however, ugh. Final Fantasy VII had great minigames. We all loved the motorcycle chase, the snowboarding, the chocobo racing, but the thing was, they were completely optional and not necessary to play. They had simple rules and controls, and you didn't need to go back to them for any special prizes. They were just nice, fun diversions. But if you want Tidus's ultimate weapon, you need to ride that chocobo. With Wakka, you need to play lots of Blitzball. With Kimahri, you collect butterflies, and Lulu, you dodge lightning. Some people like playing RPGs because they're not good at these types of gameplay activities. So when you design a game where the only way to get the best weapons is to force them to play some really hard chocobo races and stuff, well hey, that's not exactly the best call in the world. And I say this as a guy who doesn't even find some of these to be all that bad. Like, am I the only one who beat these things in about 30 to 40 minutes? With the chocobo racing, you gotta collect balloons and dodge all the birds who come right the fuck out of nowhere really fast. Get a time of 0, you win. And yeah, it's trial and error, but I don't know. It only took me like 10 tries or so, and then I got it. In the forest, you collect butterflies, and you have to get all the blue ones under a certain time limit while dodging all the red ones. And yeah, the camera certainly could be better, but again, Took me like 7 tries each, and I got it real quick. Like, maybe I'm just super lucky, but in 2002, I did this with very little issue and never touched him again for 16 years. Then I played it again for the retrospective, and I had the exact same experience. I'm not defending these games, mind you. I just don't think they were as bad as some people exaggerate them to be. Well, except for Lulu's. Who thought this was a good idea? You have to dodge 200 consecutive lightning bolts, and you can't just use an auto-fire controller to cheat. You can only press the X button once when the flash happens. More than that, you get struck. 200! Were they high? Who would have the patience to do all of this? Well, me apparently, but oh my god, that game sucks. Ugh. Look, personally, I don't find getting all of the weapons to be that annoying, but it was still a really bad idea to hide them all behind some pretty unpolished minigames. You can always customize a weapon that's just as good, but if you're a completionist, hoo boy, brace yourself, because you're in for some bullshit. At least the battles are still good. Now seriously man, this game's battle system is one of the best in the whole entire series. It's so addicting winning every random battle that comes your way. Some would say that the rock, paper, scissors approach can make some of the battles pretty easy and basic. Cause yeah, when you see a flan, use Lulu. You see a bird, use Waka. See a Machina, use Riku. I'm one-shotting everything, and I often see the same enemy types quite a bit. But I always find it much more interesting to try using every single party member I can in every battle. Let's not kill this thing quickly, let's bring Yuna in to heal, or Kimahri to just guard and do nothing. That counts as an action. Also, let's be real, not every battle is so simple. You can't one-shot the Behemoth, or the Tonberry, or the Iron Giants. They often throw enemies at you that turn out to be way more intense than you thought they were gonna be. And the great thing is, I never felt the need to grind. I would only play the battles I ran into, and I could handle most bosses without needing to beef myself up. And that's always a great sign of a well-paced RPG. I find the bosses to be so interesting and creative. They actually have tactics that require me to stop and think about what I should be doing. Whether I should destroy certain body parts to get to the core. How I should arrange the magic circles, giving them power. There were so many unique situations you found yourself in. Like one boss you fight high in the sky on top of Cid's airship, and you actually have to tell him when to fly close so you can wail on him, and when to pull away and dodge the beast's super attacks. There are times where you're underwater, and that means you're limited to using just Titus, Waka, and Riku. Can't switch anyone out, can't use any magic. And there are a few bosses that will test how well you've prepared your team, especially when they can turn you to stone and instantly kill you. This game even has summoner battles, where Yuna can take on another summoner and they can duel with their Aeons, Pokemon style. And it answers the age-old question I've always wondered about these games. Can two summoners call down the same beast? And no! If your enemy uses Ifrit, you gotta use someone else. They use Anima, you gotta work around it. One of my favorite fights is in the Zanarkand Temple when this beast pops out and you find yourself in a 6-ring circle. This thing has a devastating swing attack that hits like a truck, and he always uses it whenever someone hits him. It's a counter move. So you gotta move the characters around knowing that you want to reduce the party damage and how to maintain your own health, and Yuna can't cast group healing magic, only single healing magic, and yeah, it's an interesting fight. I haven't felt a puzzle element to boss fights like this since Final Fantasy V. Not to say that 10 is as hard as 5, but it is a game that starts out simple and ramps up to deliver an effective challenge. Especially if you complete the monster arena and take on all the various super bosses that come with it. Admittedly, it is a time-consuming process to get all of these bosses to appear. You have to capture 10 of every enemy in the game just to fill in the bestiary of this place. But when you do, get ready for some tough battles that make Omega Weapon look like a chump. No, seriously, Omega Weapon's a chump in the original PlayStation 2 game. It only has 99,999 health, and that makes it real easy to stun and decimate with delay attacks. Whoops! The super boss Nemesis, however, has 10 million HP. Jesus. You better have a weapon that breaks the damage limit with this guy. Well, all the bosses in the arena, really. Trust me, they are beefy. And one of them farts fire. Final Fantasy X is a really fun game to play, and at times, a challenging one. The bosses have given me and my friends tons of grief, and that comes to a pretty big problem with the game. The problem being that you cannot skip the cutscenes. Yeah, really. When you die to a boss, you get kicked back to the title screen. No retry option, no jumping back in. You gotta reload your save, and you gotta rewatch any potential cutscene that may have preceded said boss fight. And for this reason alone, my friends really hated fighting Seymour Flux and Yunalesca. You might be thinking, oh well, I'll pick up the remaster on PlayStation 4. Surely that added a skip option, right? Nope. Maybe the future Nintendo Switch version will finally add the feature, but as of 2019, you gotta sit through the story every time you play it. And the only way to speed it up a little is to interrupt individual lines with the X button. And yeah, some people hate that. It never really bothered me because if I was ever going to replay Final Fantasy X, chances are it's been a while and I'm actually interested in rewatching the story. One of the things I think is pretty underappreciated is the game's pacing, and how you never really sat and watched long cutscenes without some kind of gameplay popping in every now and then. Game starts, and you're already trashing Sin Spawn in Zanarkand, fighting for your life in the ruins, helping Riku salvage underwater, fighting with Wakka, solving the temple's puzzles, battling to the boat, battling on the boat. This was all in the span of 2 hours. Gameplay was always constantly happening. It's funny how RPGs have only grown as time goes on. I mean, I love Persona 5 and all, but seriously, how many text messages does a kid need to read? The game's pacing was really thoughtful, and just going through the story didn't take that long. When I got to the final save point just before the final boss, even with the cutscenes, my time clocked in at 40 hours. Just like all of the previous games. And one of the things that makes Final Fantasy X interesting to replay is that it's not always the same experience. You have the Albed primers, as I mentioned before, to hear new pieces of dialogue you didn't understand, but also, like previous games, you occasionally get to choose what Titus says in conversations. You can help shape his personality a tiny bit and actually affect which characters are closest to him. One playthrough I'm riding on the snowmobile with Lulu, and now I'm riding alongside Auron, getting new story bits I've never seen before. Huh. You can even decide the fate of the 2 Crusader guys, Luzu and Gata. One of them is going to get killed by Sin, and which one does hangs on your very words. I do wish there were more scenes that changed. There certainly isn't a gold saucer type date scene like in 7, but again, I always appreciate those few little touches where something isn't quite how you remember it, and it makes a second playthrough just a little more fresh. Although I do find it interesting that you can totally control the kind of woman that Titus is interested in. You can say that Yuna's not your type, and then you can absolutely hit on either Lulu or Riku. Seriously, if you play this game as if you're trying to hook up with Riku, this can make certain scenes that come later feel really awkward, and it makes Titus look like such a colossal fuckboy. Like seriously, why did they even throw in these dialogue choices if it doesn't change anything? Ugh. A big part of the story, and one of the most effective things about it, is the romance between Titus and Yuna. He's the energetic fish out of water, she's the girl who falls in love as she heads to her death. But suddenly she finds herself coming up with reasons to live as he keeps opening her mind to new possibilities.
What was that?
Also, he teaches her how to whistle, which apparently isn't a thing in Spira, but he promises her if she ever needs him, just whistle and he'll come to her almost immediately. Daw. Things escalate in the Macalania forest after they escape Bevel. Yuna's faith is shaken. Yevon has been corrupt this entire time. Her whole world has been turned upside down, and Titus is trying to save her life. He suggests, well hey, let's stop. Give up the pilgrimage. Let's forget about all of this and just let some other summoner do it. They could devote time to finding his home, finding a way to Zanarkand, a city that never sleeps, where everyone's happy. It'll be great! But Yuna can't do it. She made a promise to Spira. She can't let sin live. And Titus, being unable to see Yuna sad, lets the emotion get to him. This is one of the most memorable scenes in the whole entire game. You never often see Final Fantasy characters embrace each other and just have a full-on love scene. I love the shot of Kimahri smiling. I love the dialogue between them.
Stay with me. Until the end.
Not until the end. Always.
Always then.
I love when she whistles and he immediately runs back. I love how cute it is when she runs up and grabs his hand as they walk back to the group. You know, it's interesting. Almost every girl I knew in school who played RPGs, they all loved Yuna. Every single one of them. And I gotta imagine they felt some pretty big escapism through this scene as well. I was a little worried coming back to 10. I didn't know if it was gonna hold up. If all of my childhood memories were going to fail me and it was actually going to be super, super terrible. But this scene, along with so many others, was still fantastic after all these years. This game still resonates with me so much. And believe me, I'm trying to see what people dislike about this game. It's got weird voice acting sometimes.
Stay away from the summoner! Stay away from the summoner!
Weird animations. And bizarre fourth wall breaking humor.
They say Seymour went to Macarena Temple.
Macalania Temple.
Alright?
And yeah, that's funny. It's a dated game. It was made 17 years ago. But that's what makes these early video games so much fun. That bizarre brand of weirdness that only Squaresoft was capable of, that makes this game so memorable for me. And now, let's talk about the laughing scene. Even if you've never played the game, you probably know about it. After all, it's the worst voice acting in the world. Like, I get it. That's funny. It's a funny voice clip. Easy to make memes with. How could Titus laugh like such an idiot? But using this clip as an example of why the game's bad? Not even close. Context is everything. Titus has just learned his dad is alive and transformed into an evil killer whale. And now Auron's dragging him along on a dangerous journey, and it doesn't look like he'll ever get home. He's upset, and Yuna notices. She mentions that it helped to practice smiling when she's feeling sad, and she suggests Titus give it a shot.
This is weird.
Next, try laughing out loud.
What?
And Titus is still being pissy, so he lets out a sarcastic-ass laugh.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
Right? But he keeps doing it. And then eventually, Yuna joins in on the fun. They're both intentionally giving out these unnatural laughs, and it's so ridiculous that they eventually break down and start laughing for real. So, it cheered Titus up. And that's the context of the scene and why it's not just a bad performance. There's a reason for it. Even the Japanese version has the exact same delivery. They wouldn't write lines like this if it weren't meant to be bad.
What are you looking at?
We were just worried you guys might have gone crazy.
So yeah, I just wanted to help spread information about why this scene is the way it is. Final Fantasy X is often misunderstood, and maybe I just enlightened some of you. Either way, it is still pretty funny out of context, and heck, even the voice actors and the developers have joined in on the fun.
It makes me just want to laugh out loud.
I have no idea how to react to that, so I'm just gonna ignore you.
So yeah, this is Final Fantasy X, man, and I love every bit of it. I guess I should start wrapping this up. After all, we're at the hour 30 mark. Sorry about that, I don't know how to shut up. So I'll breeze through some talking points real quick before I cover the ending. Number 1, I love that there are unique voiceovers during battles. This game was so ahead of its time.
How can a bird grow so big?
The mountain itself is the trial.
Don't you rock, Needles?
You're not too bad.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Final Fantasy, I know you love Star Wars, but when you replicate a race of creatures to be exactly like Jar Jar Binks, you've gone too far!
Is everybody okay? No, I don't think so. It's bad idea, yes. Impossible, impossible.
I love the Aeon Anima. He's this creepy demon fish that's all wrapped up in chains, but he's super powerful to the point that he can kill enemies just by looking at them. And when he does, his eye starts bleeding. It's fucking metal as hell, man. Every time you get an Aeon, you have to solve puzzles in the temples, which almost always involves picking up spheres and placing them in the right slots, and you occasionally push things around. I actually don't mind these puzzles too much, with the exception of Bavel and its boring moving walkways. But I do think they would have been a lot more bearable if Titus could just hold 2 spheres at a time. He's got 2 hands! Let him hold 2! I love the Luca Theater. It's a building that allows you to rewatch any of the CG cutscenes as well as re-listen to all of the music in the game. I always wanted a sound test of sorts in Final Fantasy, before there were YouTube playlists that I could use on the internet. I spent many a night doing homework while leaving the game on at these menus. Tetsuya Nomura is the character designer of Final Fantasy X. He's been designing things for the series since number 5. But he really came into his own in the early 2000s. I'm sure if you're a Kingdom Hearts fan, you know this, but god damn is he a madman. Some of these clothing designs are insane. Why does Lulu need all of these belts? How could that possibly be convenient to put on? And when you don't have summoners just walking around in thongs the entire time, you probably get people like Lucille here, who I think is wearing a floral body cast? That doesn't look comfortable. Really though, I'm mostly joking. I actually enjoy most of the designs, whether it's Yuna's yukata, Orin's samurai garb, and Jack's not quite Jack Sparrow approach to things. But I've really been waiting to make a comment about Nomura's eccentric style. Boy does he love belts, and zippers, and whatever the hell this lady from Dirge of Cerberus is supposed to be wearing. Nomura, you are a mystery. Oh, and Waka stops being racist after he finds out Yevon is corrupt. He apologizes to the Albed for his prejudice and becomes a better person. He's still going to hell for this line, though.
Hey, look, don't get so down. Boom! Like happy festival fireworks, yeah?
But yeah, I'm done. Let's get to the ending. Finally, our heroes make it to their final destination, Zanarkand, the place where Yuna will give her life to summon the final Aeon that will defeat Sin. And when everyone arrives, they get approached by Yuna Leska, a woman who Yuna was named after that was the first person to defeat Sin so many generations ago. And no, she's not alive, she is very much a zombie just like Seymour. So it turns out that Aeons are not exactly gods. They are actually created through a special ritual at all of the temples. A ritual that sacrifices one's humanity to transform them into the faith. Their bodies remain as statues, but their soul is very much alive to be the Aeons that will aid people in battle. So even if you thought Yevon was answering to them, nah, they were created by Yevonites themselves. And the final Aeon requires a sacrifice. Not only must Yuna die, but one of her guardians must trade their humanity as well. Which explains what happened to Jecht as he volunteered to be Braska's final Aeon. And of course, Titus hates all of this. There's no reason to go through with this. If Yevon's a sham and Sin will just be reborn later, then what's even the point? Break the cycle! So with no other option, they choose to ask Yuna Leska if she knows of any other way. When will Sin go away for good? And amazingly, Yuna Leska just says, nah fam, Sin's eternal. It ain't going anywhere.
If we atone for our crimes, Sin will stop coming back, yeah? Someday it'll be gone, yeah?
Will humanity ever attain such purity?
And with this lack of assurance that anything is going to change, Yuna finally takes a stand and acknowledges this cycle as a false tradition. And Yuna Leska doesn't take this very well, so she tries to kill them, as all good people do. But of course, she gets defeated and says that even if there was another way to stop Sin, Yevon the Immortal would just recreate it again. Yevon, eh? Also, Oren pulls Titus aside to confirm what we already knew, that he rebelled against Yunalesca's solution and was killed for it. Oren is unsent, hanging on until he can take care of his dear friend Jecht. And yeah, we get a lot of explanation in the last 2 hours. Sid shows up to give everybody a permanent home on the airship, and they all fly back to Bavel to confront Maester Micah to find out what Yevon is. Once Micah learns that Yunalesca is dead for good, though, he loses all hope and fades away to the afterlife. Well, that was easy. So instead, Yuna gets answers from Bavel's faith, who in this case would be Bahamut. And there's not much to it. He's an old summoner from the past who learned to merge with the very Aeons he could control, and using this power, he turns his Aeons into Sin. He's been clinging to immortality so long that he doesn't even have a consciousness anymore. Yevon exists to make Sin and nothing more. So the solution is to make sure he has no more Aeons to inhabit and then take him out. Unfortunately, that means taking down Jecht. And well, he's Sin. But don't worry, Titus comes up with a plan real quick. Because of course he does. Also, it's around approaching Zanarkand that we get introduced to a big plot twist that's going to affect the ending. And I've never really loved it all that much, but here we go. Upon reaching Mount Gagazet, our heroes stumble upon a wall that's filled with the souls of the faith. Titus touches it, and he blacks out, waking up back in Zanarkand. His Zanarkand. Zuh?
Wait, this is a dream.
Precisely.
So, the Faith are in a sleeping state and they can't wake up because of Sin. And during this time, the Faith managed to dream about and reconstruct a version of Zanarkand as a sort of snapshot memory of what it used to be in their heads. But none of it is real. The buildings are part of the dream. Jecht is part of the dream. Titus is also a dream. Titus didn't travel 1,000 years into the future, he traveled into the real world through Sin. And yeah, that's quite the twist. So many questions go through my mind. How did Oren get there? Through Sin? Where is it in Spira that Sin could travel to it? I mean, Jecht would have had to leave Zanarkand through Sin as well, right? Ugh, my brain hurts. This twist exists to add a tragic element to the story. Namely, that after everybody defeats Sin, the Faith will finally wake up. And when that happens, Titus is going bye-bye. And after this twist happens, Titus barely acknowledges it, which is kind of shocking. No inner monologue, he doesn't bring it up to Oren, he just keeps it inside until Bahamut apologizes because of what's going to happen when they win.
Our dream will vanish. I'm sorry.
About what?
Oh, nothing.
You're hiding something.
Why won't you just tell her? I think what I find most surprising is how content Titus seems to be with this decision. He's almost fine knowing that he's not real, that he'll disappear when all of this is over. And yeah, I guess that's character growth. He's certainly matured and grown as a person, but damn, man, this is your existence we're talking about. Either way, Titus remembers that Jecht really enjoyed listening to the Hymn of the Faith, so they decide to blast the song in the airship speakers, as well as encourage the citizens of Spira to sing along. That way, Jecht as Sin will be really happy and docile. And when it's nice and calm, we can blow his fucking arms off! So yeah, this plan actually works, and Sin's mouth opens up to let the airship fly on through. Turns out there's a trippy dungeon inside of Sin. Go figure. Also, Seymour somehow found his way inside too. Again, I don't know how these undead people get from place to place, but whatever. He gets his ass kicked for the 4th time so that Yuna can properly send him to the afterlife at long last. And that takes us to the final confrontation. It's been 10 years, but Titus finally gets to see his old man face to face for one last time.
You've really grown.
Yeah, but you're still bigger.
Well, I am Sin, you know.
Jecht explains that the Hymn of the Faith is wearing off, and when that happens, he can't hold himself back as the final Aeon. Titus has to kill him right here and now, his own father, to prevent Yevon from taking control.
Let's end this.
Final boss time. I fucking love the Aeon design of Jecht. And you know what else is great about this battle? The fact that the song Otherworld is playing throughout. It actually showed up earlier in the opening cutscene, but basically Nobuo Uematsu made a heavy metal rock song for the game, and holy shit, it's awesome. This is the best part of the whole final encounter, and it goes as planned. Jecht is mortally wounded, and with his father dying in his arms, Titus behaves as he usually did around his old man.
You'll cry. You're gonna cry. You always cry. See? You're crying.
I hate you, Dad.
I love this. Titus's relationship with his father was very conflicting, and to have him both cry while telling him that he hates him, such a perfect send-off. I freaking love these characters, man. Now the rest of the final boss fight is not nearly as interesting. Yevon's gonna keep coming back unless all the Aeons are gone, so that means we enter a multi-phase fight where Yuna literally has to call down every single Aeon she's collected along the journey so that the party can fight them all. And they don't just pop in either. You gotta watch every single one of their entrances all over again in one giant drawn-out battle. But what's even more baffling, and I have no idea why they chose to do this, everyone has a permanent auto life cast onto them. When did that happen? Why does it happen? It basically means that no matter what, you can't lose this fight. I've died multiple times, lost all 3 party members, and nothing. They just come back to life again with no consequence whatsoever. You cannot lose against Yevon, making this entire battle a glorified cutscene. When you just want to rewatch the ending, this fight's a real drag to play, and it's the one shitty part of an otherwise solid finale. Also, Yevon turns out to be a tiny little tick that does nothing but cast Curaga on itself when you hit him. It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic. But yeah, that's the final boss, ladies and gentlemen. With it defeated, Yuna performs the final sending to rid it from Spira once and for all. And that's when we say goodbye to another friend.
Don't stop.
But
It's been long enough.
Trying to condense all the emotion and character development of the game in about less than 2 hours is not easy. All I can say is that Auron is one of the greatest characters in all of Final Fantasy.
This is your world now.
His exit and this game's storytelling is just so powerful. And boy, it gets even worse. Sin is destroyed. The curse that has been plaguing Spira for 1,000 years is finally gone, and the faith can finally awaken from their slumber. But of course, we know what that means. Another heart-wrenching goodbye as Titus starts to fade away before Yuna's eyes. And yeah, man, after the romance these two had, after the grand adventure they went on, with the beautiful orchestral score enhancing this scene, god damn. Even in 2018, I teared up watching this stuff. It's such a sad ending.
Yuna!
I love you.
And as Titus ultimately fades away, we see him meeting up with Braska, Auron, and his old man Jecht, who gives him a high five on his way down. Later in Spira, though, Yuna is whistling out at the docks, whistling and hoping to see Titus return. But alas, he never shows up. It's not like Final Fantasy IX, where we eventually get that uplifting surprise return. Those who have passed are gone, and as Yuna gives a speech to the people of Spira, that's what she wants people to take away from this new era of peace.
The people and the friends that we have lost. No dreams that have faded. never forget them.
I love Final Fantasy X so much. The story and characters are incredible, the battle system is so damn fun, and the music is breathtaking. This game was cutting-edge, next-generation stuff when it dropped, and 17 years later, I am still thinking about it to this day. It's not a perfect game. I get why people would hate the mini-games. It really should have had skippable cutscenes. It does still make these baffling oddball decisions that can make certain parts a little annoying. But I've never found these problems to be deal breakers. As far as I'm concerned, this was the most ambitious and best RPG on the PlayStation 2. One of the best RPGs I ever played in my whole entire life. I had such a hard time putting this game down when I was recording it, and I feel like that addictive quality means that there's something special here. Nowadays, Final Fantasy X has been remastered for the PC, PlayStation 3, Vita, and PS4. And later this year, it's going to be put onto the Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. The remastered edition is basically an HD port of the international versions, which added harder super bosses in the form of the Dark Aeons and Penance, in case you thought Nemesis and the Fiends of the Arena were too easy. It also adds an expert sphere grid that lets you customize the characters with much more freedom than the original. It has remastered music as well as updated character models, and man, I wish Square didn't update the models. Maybe I'm just too used to the originals, but ugh. I feel like the new faces have lost some of the original game's expressive quality. Yuna's hair is way too dark, everybody has these dead eyes that look deep into your soul, and maybe I'm just being a stickler, but yeah, I find it pretty distracting. Otherwise, it's still Final Fantasy X. When it comes out for the Switch, I would absolutely recommend it. Back in 2008, the very first YouTube video I ever made was a parody of Final Fantasy X, where I made fun of Titus and just how whiny he can be throughout the adventure. Some people might have assumed that I hated the game, but it was more that I could just laugh at its shortcomings. This game is one of the many reasons I wanted to do a Final Fantasy retrospective. It means so damn much to me. It's why I keep giving every new game that Square makes a chance. Because when Final Fantasy was good, holy shit was it good. And this was another shining example of what made Final Fantasy so damn special. These videos just keep getting longer and longer. Again, sorry for the wait. It takes quite a while to edit these vids the way I do, and I thank everyone who's been super patient with me. But we're not quite done with Spira yet, are we? Because the next game in the retrospective was the first ever sequel to a numbered Final Fantasy. Next time, I look at Final Fantasy X-2.